Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We have a lot to cover today about grants, business sponsors, matching gifts. So I want to make sure that we fully use our time together. So we are going to go ahead and do our intros and then get right into the content here. We had a lot of people register for this one. So I just want to assure everyone that this is being recorded. So even if you are not watching this live, but you had registered, everybody will be receiving a recording of this webinar in your inbox, as well as a little free goodie. So you'll be getting our 2025 edition of the school grant guide. So that will automatically be sent to you as well if you registered for this webinar. If you are joining us live, hello there. It looks like we have 11 people so far. Welcome. Thank you for being here. All right, so if you've been at our other two webinars, I'm probably a familiar face. I'm Maggie. I'm the marketing director here at Get Moving Fundraising. That basically means I get to do fun stuff like this, host webinars, manage our social media, our email, and that's really the best way to get our expert knowledge about event-based or a thon-based fundraising and how schools are raising and keeping more by using FundHub, which is our online platform. So I wanted to say that at the beginning, just in case some of us are not sure what we do here at Get Movin', and also because we're going to be referring to FundHub a little bit at the end with some of our features. So I am thrilled to be joined today by Andrea Wheeler. She is a senior fundraising coach with us, and she also even has some personal experience with business sponsors and grant applications. So Andrea, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to help with the webinar today. I've been with Get Movin' for 9 years and helping schools in mainly Georgia and Florida. Before that, I was on my school's PTO where my daughters attended, and I worked mainly with fundraisers, spring flings. I was on the board, and so I was also heavily involved with those business sponsors as well. So again, just happy to help.
Right. So today we're going to cover three main topics. The first being how to secure local business sponsors, like Andrea just said. So we're going to be tapping into some of her knowledge there as well. Then we're going to be digging into a little bit of a crash course about K through 12 grants. So I have done a webinar in the past that some of you may have seen about grants. So if you're looking for even deeper information about that, we'll also be providing some additional resources there as well. And then lastly, touching on employer matched donations and how, if you're not taking advantage of corporate matching or employer matching gifts, you might be leaving some significant funds on the table. So we definitely want to save some time at the end to kind of go over that program. And that if you're new to employer match, how you can integrate that into your next fundraiser as well. And then lastly, we'll just end with a few actionable resources, some more steps for your team to take to bring some of this additional funding to your school. So let's go ahead and kick it off with the first topic here, business sponsors. So I don't know about you guys, but when I first kind of came into the world of fundraising, which I've been with Get Movin' for, I don't know, like a decade now, a long time. But when I first heard business sponsorship, kind of first thinking about like big corporate deals or like complicated contracts, and that's really not what we're talking about here. So in reality, sponsorships are, I would say, one of the easiest ways to boost your fundraising profit. And it does it without putting all of the pressure on your parents and your donors. Many companies actually have budgets specifically set aside for community giving. So if you're new to organizing a fundraiser and maybe you're nervous or unsure about reaching out to a local business, just remember that sort of behind the philanthropy of it, there's a real return on investment for businesses that sponsor events and schools. Andrea, so as a fundraising coach, what do you think, I think maybe as a good entry point here, are some of the misconceptions when it comes to business sponsors for schools?
Well, and you touched a little bit on it already that companies just are not interested or they don't have the nonprofit or they don't have the money provided and set aside. Most of the companies, especially corporations, have money set aside to help nonprofit groups. So the biggest thing is you want to make sure that it's a great two-way street. It's a win-win for both parties involved. So one way to do that is to make sure you have some fun marketing tools that they will be able to be a part of because they are going to be a sponsor with the school. So you definitely want it to be a two-way street where they're getting a lot of great things as well as the school too.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we say business sponsors too, like I want to even define that a little bit because we should be specific. Who are we actually reaching out to? Because there's a whole range. There's a lot of different types of businesses that can support your school. So you have, and I'm just going to list kind of some categories here just to get your mind thinking. And then, if you're watching the recording of this, you can maybe sit down and start to list within the specific categories actual businesses within your area that this might apply to. So, of course, you have your local small businesses. So, think of more about your kind of brick and mortar within your community. You have realtors, dentists, boutiques, auto dealers, restaurants. So, these are businesses that really thrive on community engagement and they love supporting schools because, as Andrea said, it is great PR for them. And most likely, they have a personal tie to your school as well. Then you have service providers. So these are more, you might not always think of these when you think of business sponsors, but these are like HVAC companies, plumbers, electricians, landscapers. Again, being a business sponsor gives them great exposure and often drives in direct business for them. Healthcare and wellness is another one I want to mention. Pediatricians, I already mentioned dentists, orthodontists, fitness centers. These are really great because these are the ones that we said are going to have that budget that has been set aside for community engagement. And a lot of their clientele are going to be parents. So they're going to want to work with your school and partner with your school and sponsor your events because it's bringing them to the exact audience that they want to reach. A few more categories are going to be community organizations. So think about your Rotary clubs, your YMCA, your Lions Club, even your Chamber of Commerce. We're going to actually talk about these groups a little bit more when we talk about grants, but they also might be good to hit up for sponsorships for your events. And we have tech and telecom companies. So again, you might not think of these when you're thinking about business sponsors, but these are like internet providers, even a bigger retailer like Best Buy. So these are great. I wanted to mention these because even beyond monetary sponsorships, they can really provide in-kind gifts. So if you're looking to provide new computers, new tablets, Wi-Fi hotspots for your school, you don't always have to pay outright for that. You can get sponsors that can actually bring that to your school. And then lastly, I want to talk about hospitality and entertainment. So think about if you have a amusement park that's closer to your school or at least within your state, driving distance, bowling alleys, movie theaters. When you're thinking about sponsorships, it's not always cash. So, right, I have here sponsorship types. So that's when you can start thinking about these different businesses that can provide event expenses, sponsoring different stations at your event, like getting a DJ, things like that. Or with the hospitality and entertainment businesses, providing like tickets or things for your raffle where they can get free, entries to their place of business. And then lastly, so I have local, but then also big brand. So when we're thinking about sponsors, you can also be considering Walmart, Target, Costco, Sam's Club, Starbucks, Chick-fil-A. All of these big brand corporations are going to have branches that are local within your community. And those branches are going to be sort of the entry point to accessing some of their local giving programs. So you can always go on to their website to find this out. But honestly, I think the best way is to actually go into the physical store in your community and ask to speak to the store manager. And then if you ask them like, hey, I'm hosting this fundraiser for my school, does your corporation provide a local giving program? program. And a lot of times they do. And a lot of times the application for that is actually a lot more simple than you'd think. So these are just some things that kind of expand the way we're thinking about business sponsors. You have different business types that you can access, and then you have different sponsorship types. So there's really a lot that can be provided from local businesses to help support your event. Okay, so now let's talk about how do we actually approach the businesses? What are we offering them, right? Andrea, excuse me, Maria was on our last webinar. Andrea, you brought up the great point about making it a two-way street, right? So we need to have something that we're offering the businesses to make it make sense for them from a, kind of financial transactional standpoint. So we have a good example here. This is from a school that works with us for a long time, but this is an actual flyer that they take to the business and offer a tiered package. So Andrea, can you kind of speak to this a little bit? Do you have any other examples for a sponsorship package?
Absolutely. So you can do different sponsorship levels, and these are actually pretty easy to do for most, even if it's a local company or a corporation, depending on how much money they have set aside for nonprofits. One other option that you can take a step further is do a Stock the Lounge or do a quarterly sponsorship. Julian Creek Elementary down the road from me in St. John's, Florida, they do this really well, and they utilize social media, of course, to get the word out. They also, I'm sure, go door to door as talking to different companies, and asking for different sponsorships. But Stock the Lounge is something fun that they do quarterly for teachers, for teacher appreciation, and they get companies to sign up for those smaller ones as well.
I love that. Yeah. So when we're talking about sponsorship, it's not just for your event, right? Like think about as a PTO, as a PTA, what are you doing throughout the year and how could you get sponsorship for that? What are you paying for? And do you have to be the one paying for it, right? Could you get a sponsor that is actually funding that program like Stock the Lounge? I love that idea. And so, right, there's different businesses, there's different sponsorship types, and there's also when you're creating your sponsorship package, different incentives for the businesses themselves. So we have this great example of the different levels. And then within those levels, there's different types of incentivizing. So you kind of have your physical incentives. So this is typically what you think of, like if you have a printed banner out on your school fence, like if you're doing a fun run, for example, and you'll have all of the logos on the banner for the businesses sponsoring your event. Also have your event t-shirt. So this is a little bit small, but on the back of these shirts are logos from all of the business sponsors for their fun run, and all of the kids get a t-shirt. You could also have printed flyers, like anything kind of tangible that you have that you could put a logo or some shout out for your sponsors. That is great PR. That's great exposure for them. What's becoming more popular because you're not having to spend the money for the printing is a digital sponsorship package. So this is where you do like daily social media shout outs for your business sponsors, and then you're linking to their social media profile. So any business owner, any store manager, like that's gold for them because that's linking back to their profile or linking back to their website. So you might have on your, if you have a PTO website, or even your school website, you might have a section on there that's like, our 2025 sponsors, and then it's all of their logos, and those logos link to their actual website, which as a marketing director, that's amazing because that's getting backlinks and SEO and all of this sort of technical stuff where you're able to do a lot more with the exposure than what you can do just on like a printed banner. And then you have event-based incentives. So this is where maybe if you have kind of that platinum level, maybe you have like a booth for that sponsor, like at your actual event. Maybe they have more of like a speaking opportunity or something that's a little bit more like they're physically at your event. I know we've seen an example, Andrea, I have no idea if it's your school, it could be, but they actually had a local fitness center come to the fun run and like lead warm up for the kids. So that was more interactive, and like that's a great sponsorship opportunity as well. Um, so, Andrea, let's talk about kind of the last step here then that I want to cover for business sponsors. And that's how do you actually like literally approach a business, especially for somebody that's never done this before and is maybe a little bit intimidated. What are some good tips for approaching the businesses and getting them to say yes to be a sponsor?
One of the best tips is to use your parent connections that you already have. So
For
there may
sure.
be board members, there may be members of the PTA who have that connection with a local company or even a corporation, and then they can really put you, get you in touch with the right person to talk
Right.
to. So that's a really important one. I do think making the ask personal. So pick up the phone, do something that we don't typically do nowadays. Give them a
Yeah.
call or stop by the office, stop by the company and ask in person. I really think that goes a long way versus just an email where they may not really even read it. They'll just delete that.
Right.
So, and then you touched a little bit on this, the visibility is key. So when you do have a business who's ready to sign up and to be a sponsor, whether it's for the event or for the year or for a quarterly situation, you want to definitely make sure they're being marketed well,
Mhm.
whether that's through social media, through t-shirts, through banners, and so on. And then one thing that I thought was really neat, that we've done in the past at our schools is the following up, showing gratitude. Some of our schools that I've worked with in the past have done these end of the year events where they do just a fun dinner. It could be casual, it could be something really formal, and they invite those business sponsors there to kind of thank them for the year and for helping them through the entire year or for the event that they helped with.
Yeah, I love that. That's really smart because once you get a sponsor, you don't want to just have it for like one event, right? Or like
Exactly.
one year. You want that to be a sponsor that continues to come back year after year to help support you. So having that piece at the end, that gratitude, that thank you. I love the idea of having kind of a thank you event for all the sponsors. I think that's great. That just incentivizes them again that next year when you come back and you're asking again, they're like, oh yeah, of course. We have a relationship now. It's not just like a one-time kind of transactional thing. So all great stuff for business sponsors. So we're already almost 10 minutes in. We got to get to the grants. There's a lot to talk about with school grants. So for this next slide, you'll see I have crash course because like I said, there's so much we could talk about with grants, but I want to keep it a little bit high level. And when we're talking about grants, right, we're a fundraising company. So you might be thinking like, well, fundraising grants, like, what's the difference? When do I go for one versus the other? So unlike traditional kind of fundraising, grants provide typically bigger funding amounts without relying on those individual donations from family members or, donors in general. A few caveats with it, which I think we're going to talk about again in a little bit, but it's going to take longer to get your grant funds. There might be some restrictions on how to use those funds. And of course, it's not a sure thing, right? You apply, you might not win, but the reward is so much bigger that typically it's worth it trying to apply for these bigger grants to fund specific projects. So that's kind of the core difference there is you're typically trying to fund something specific like a new program, new tech upgrades, facility upgrades, something that is a really big dollar amount that it would only be possible if you can kind of get this bigger grant to make happen. So the trick then, there's millions of dollars of grants available to schools, by the way. So sometimes when I talk about grants, some schools will be like, well, I don't know what's available to me. They are available. The trick is finding them and finding the ones that fit your school, fit your need, and fit the time frame as well. Because grants, they're only going to have an eligibility window open for so long. So where do you start? I typically tell schools to start small. in this circumstance, you want to be a big fish in a little pond when you're applying for grants. So you do want to start local. Some key places to start is like a city education foundation. So not all cities will have this, but some cities will have dedicated funds for school programs. Another thing, so we had mentioned this with business sponsors, but checking out your community organizations, your Rotary clubs. Often they will have district grant programs specifically for education. So I believe if you go to my.rotary.org, I believe you can actually look for your specific district and see if there is a program available for you from your local Rotary club. And then speaking of districts, your literal school district might have some grant money. So a lot of times federal funding will be awarded to a district rather than a particular school. And so your district might have some funds that if you ask your administration, you might be able to get the point person for the district to be able to see if they have any funding available for specific projects. Then, of course, once you've kind of tapped out your local search, then certainly look at state and federal. This especially is going to have those bigger dollar amounts. So if you're really looking to fund a really big project, I would look at state and federal. So your state's Department of Education website, this is a great place to start looking for funding opportunities. Then you have something like grants.gov. This is great, but it's a little bit hard to navigate if it's your first time, but they do have filters and some search criteria there as well to help you find education related grants. And then if you're looking for something a little bit more specific, so there is like Title I funding that you can access. There is funding specific for STEM programs. So depending on the need you're trying to fund, sometimes it's better to start there rather than trying to start like defining your school. You kind of start with the need and seeing what grants are available for you. Technology is also kind of tied into STEM as well. Um, and then also, if you are running, I just want to point out if you are running like any after school programs, a lot of times PTOs and PTAs will be part of that. There is the 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant. This is a federal funded grant. And so that might also be something for you to check out. But speaking of national grants, we also have an annual grant that we do here at Get Moving. It's open to any K through 12 school across the country. Also includes our overseas military schools. Want to mention that as a military family myself. Andrea, can you tell us a little bit about this grant that we do and also what we can learn from some of our past winners?
Sure. So this is called the Dream Team Grant, and it really came out shortly after COVID that we really wanted to help schools, and not even just schools that we work with. It can be anyone to apply. So our 2022 winner, so a dream team means we're aiming to support a solid team of volunteers who have a dream for their school to just help out however they think, would be best for their school. So our 2022 school who won is from Alaska, which is really cool. And they wanted to do a STEM night that they were not able to host for several years because they didn't have the funds for it. So it really worked out for them to be able to do that for their families there. And then in 2023, we had an inner city school that won that year, and they were able to purchase gym equipment for their brand new gym that they had built, which is great. Just last month, we announced our 2024 winner, which is Patterson Elementary. They're a Title I school in Conroe, Texas. And the cool thing with them is they just really wanted to be able to help their students and their families to be able to come to events, to not have it as expensive as it can be. And one of the items that they're using the funds for too is to really decrease the amount that some of the field trips they go on can cost for, especially for siblings at the school. So they're wanting to use some of the funds to discount those for this year, which is great. One cool thing that the president mentioned to us when we were talking to her at Patterson, though, is she said she was told by a lot of people not to even apply, that people don't win grants. And so we were very excited to let her know that she did win, and that it's definitely important for everyone to apply for these grants, especially with us as well. So.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So don't think you can't win. Apply.
Yeah.
It can't hurt to apply. So a good lesson there learned from Patterson. Okay, so this next slide, I am not going to go through piece by piece what we have on here. This is more for when you're watching the recording. Check out this slide because what I have over here are more kind of like formulas. So like I said, one of the tricks is finding a grant that is a fit for your school. So here are some formulas where it's kind of like plug and play. You can put in your city, you can put in your school name, you can put in your school type, the year. Looking, going from local all the way to state to national. And this is just going to help you find those grants that are currently open and, like I said, a good fit for your school. And then over here is just some more resources for more of that kind of corporate and nonprofit level grants. Like I said, I'm not going to go through each of them because what you will get by registering for this webinar is our 2025 grant guide that has over 30 grant opportunities for this school year, for this calendar year, I should say. So great stuff there, but I do want to take a minute just to ask Andrea, this is a perfect time to kind of ask when, again, we're thinking of fundraising, we're thinking of grants, what's a good kind of balance? And is there a situation where you would want to go for one as opposed to the other?
And both are important. But
Right.
if you're raising money for a specific project, like a playground or a STEM night or something, or a STEM lab, you really want to decide when you need the funds to come in, first of all, and also, if you can find a grant for that specific event, first of all,
Right.
too. Fundraising most likely would be a better option for that, but you also, you can decide some grants they are for STEM or for specific projects. And so those would be helpful as well. Sometimes I feel like an option, as long as you're not on a set timeline, an option of both would be good.
Yeah.
Because with grants, of course, the funding may come in later in December. It's not a for sure guarantee that you will get that funding. Whereas a fundraiser itself, you're able to decide as far as the schedule goes when you want to have it, when you're going to get the funds, and so on. So it really just depends on what type of project you have going on and how quickly you need the funds back.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. So I have one more slide about grants, but again, it's more kind of pointing to an additional resource that we have at Get Moving. So we have an entire article. There's no, like, it's not gated or anything. It's just within our blog. And it's called The Art of Grant Writing for Schools. So this goes through the entire grant application process. So we talked a lot about here in this webinar how to find grants for your school, but then of course, once you find the grant, then you got to apply for it, right? And so over here are just sort of four key takeaways, but these really are written in a lot more detail within this blog post. So if you did register, you're gonna, like I said, get this webinar recording, and then I'm also gonna put a link to this blog post for you as well if you're interested in it. But this goes through a little bit of timeline, so wanting to make sure that you give yourself at least 2 weeks to apply for a grant, especially if it is a bigger grant, and you use this time for research, for drafting your application, and then for revisions. Of course, you want to make sure that a few people have read through it. The second one here, I really do want to highlight. So you want to make sure, like if you are applying for a grant, you want to be memorable. And a really good way to do that is to make sure that you can define your project in one sentence. So you want to make sure you can state your problem, your solution, and the impact of the grant in clear terms in one sentence. If you can do that, you're going to be a lot more memorable to the people that are reading through your grants, that are going through all those applications. If they're able to describe your application in one sentence, it's going to be a real key to winning. And then third, you want to make sure that your inquiry letter or your application in general is focused on why you're a good fit. So if you are applying, for, let's say Microsoft has a grant for technology, you want to make sure that you're emphasizing how the dollars would be used to, let's say, bring in some smart boards to your classroom, right? That's a great fit. So you want to make sure that you make that connection, because the granting organization, the grants that they put out, it's also a reflection on them, right? So you want to make sure that you are a good kind of PR opportunity, even for the organizations giving out the grant. Very similar to the idea behind business sponsors. And then lastly, you want to make sure that your treasurer has read through your application. You want to make sure your budget is airtight. Sometimes they'll want you to kind of break down exactly how the money will be used. So you just want to make sure that your financials are kind of bulletproof in that way. But like I said, I'll put the link to this blog in the follow-up as well. So the last thing we do want to cover here is matching gifts. Like we said, we are getting close to time. So if you do have to drop, feel free. You will get the recording of this. And if you do want to put in any questions that you have, of course, feel free to put that in our chat as well. But Andrea, employer matching corporate gifts, it's a term we hear a lot in the fundraising world. But for those who may be new to it, can you kind of break it down for us? What do we mean when we talk about matching gift donations?
So matching employee donations is really key to a lot of these fundraisers that we do. You can actually look up the search. You can search on from our website or from other online tools to see what employers will actually match employee donations. It is something that is often neglected during an event. So you want to make sure that you remind donors to go through that process. Usually they will contact the HR department online or someone within their company to see if they do match. And if they do, they can go through the process, usually just online. Once they get an approval, then the school or the nonprofit will receive the check in the mail, or maybe an ACH transfer if they're super tech savvy as far as with that corporation. But it can be a daunting task. The great thing with us is we do have our employer matching potential with FundHub. So what that means is when a donor donates, they can check a box if they want more information about employer matching. So during their donation receipt email, they'll get a little bit more information of how to go about that process. And then if they are successful, they can let the chair know that money is in the mail, that it'll be there soon. It doesn't have to be within the event because they do get 100% of the funds. It's not being affected by us. But the beauty with that is then they are part of FundHub of the report for the employer match potential, so that then the chair can export that information, keep track of that, and they'll know if they receive a random check in the mail, why they received it. So, it can be very helpful for them to know that it's truly helpful to market that and to make sure that donors know about that process.
Mm-hmm. Right. So with employer matching, and if you're using FundHub, we're not just collecting donations, and you have all of the other features of FundHub, which if you want to kind of explore how this works, you can see this kind of mock-up here. This is showing, for this school, Superstar Academy, that they have this much potential that they could be bringing in if they're utilizing employer match, and their donors are kind of following up with the places in which they work to receive those matching donations, which, again, remember, these corporations, they have money set aside for this. So you want to make sure that you are letting your donors know, like, hey, we're able to accept, employer matching gifts. Make sure if you work for a company that has a program like this, that you are filling out. Typically, like Andrea said, it's just shooting an email to the HR department. It's filling out a form. And then the school, you're able to get those matching gifts. So it's really, really important. You're not leaving that money on the table. Andrea, do you have any example maybe of a school that has benefited from this program as well?
Well, one of the good things that Greenwood Lakes Middle School did, they're in Seminole County, North Orlando. And so what they did was they used the company search link that we have on our website, and they actually added it to their message from the school on their main school webpage. So the great thing with that is then it, first of all, reminded the donor to go through the process, but it also gave them a link to use to make sure their company would do an employer match. So then they knew exactly what to do. Then they could contact their HR department and go from there.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before we kind of wrap up for the day, we're a little bit over. Thank you for everybody who has stayed on with us live here. I just want to do a little bit of a recap. We covered a lot, and we covered a lot within a short period of time. So first off, remember, business sponsorships, they are a game changer. It's not just about boosting your fundraising profit, but it's also about helping cover the event costs for the fundraising events that you are doing. And it really is helping you keep more of what you raise. Then we talked about, of course, grants, great way to secure larger funding, especially for your bigger projects. The key there is to start local and then expand your reach out to state and then national opportunities. Again, I'm going to send you a link to that blog post if you want further help with the actual application process. And be on a lookout. So our Dream Team grant, that typically will open. We follow the start of the school year. So the back to school season, make sure you're following us at Get Moving Fundraising on all of the social platforms. And that's where we're going to announce when the application is open for our Dream Team grant. That's $3,500 to help PTO, PTA Booster Club help you make a dream a reality. And then the last thing, of course, we just covered employer matching gifts. One of the easiest way to double your donations. That's typically what we tell our schools with very minimal effort on your end. So now is the time. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. But a little bit of a wrap up here, some things you're going to see in your inbox. So keep an eye out there. The free school grant guide. So this has over 30 funding opportunities specific to schools for 2025. So you'll be receiving that. Of course, you'll be receiving a recording of this webinar. And then I do want to point out, so if you're looking for even more fundraising ideas and what's trending for 2025, please catch us live with PTO Today. So that might be a name, especially if you're in, PTO, PTA, volunteer, you'll probably know about PTO Today. We're going to be going live with them tomorrow on their Facebook page. So go ahead and check that out. We're going to be talking about giving a little bit of an insider look, what's working and what's not for 2025 when it comes to fundraising. So check us out there. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions. That means we covered everything perfectly. So great job, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining me today for this webinar. This was the last one in our spring fundraiser webinar series. I think we covered a lot of great info. So thank you so much for bringing your insight to the conversation today. And thank you so much for, again, everybody who joined us live and who registered. You will be able to find the recording of this webinar also on our YouTube page. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.